Thank you so much for joining us here at The Research Her, the show working to improve the health disparities for women of color, one topic at a time. I am Alicia. I'm here learning and growing with you as we research our way to well-being. Good morning, good afternoon, good night, whatever it is for you, good. Just, it's great. I should have started off great morning, great afternoon, great night. I am so proud to have this legend, this history maker on the Research Her podcast. We have Dr. Arianne Hunter. This actually starts off a little mini series of Aries that we're going to have on the podcast for the next few weeks. So this is our first Ari on the podcast. She is originally from OKC, Oklahoma City, and she graduated with a bachelor's degree in chemistry at Dartmouth College in 2014, and she started the PhD program at the University of Oklahoma. Now, y'all know I love some firsts. She was the first Black woman to get her PhD in organic chemistry at that university. Now, sis is bomb, okay? She published 7 journal articles in international journals. She won 9+ awards and brought in over $130,000 worth of funding through fellowships and scholarships. And on top of all of that, while she was in graduate school, she started a STEM outreach nonprofit organization for young girls. Oh my goodness, this bomb. And currently, she is obtaining postdoctoral training in forensic chemistry at the Defense Forensic Science Center. Now join us in conversation. Here is Dr. Hunter. So we have Dr. Hunter here. I'm so excited to have you.
Yes, I'm excited to be here.
Yes, so I like to start off with just a few icebreaker questions just to get us warmed up and comfortable with one another. So the first question I have for you is, what celebrity do you feel should be your best friend? Like, y'all should have been best friends.
That's easy. Me and Beyonce, like, we would be kicking it right now if our paths would just crossed once.
I feel you on that. And I know you work out. What is your favorite workout and why?
So I have a real love-hate, more so love nowadays because I'm more in shape, with the Stairmaster. So the Stairmaster is my go-to. It gets me right.
And if you could commit a crime one time, just one crime, what would it be?
It'd probably be some way to like steal $1 million so I could like pay off me and my homies' student loans.
I love that. Yeah. And I love that you didn't just say pay off my student loans, start off my business. It's like me and my friends, we all get a part of this $1 million.
Yeah.
So thank you so much. So let's get into you and your research. So your research is actually, in my opinion, related to well-being because it's about being sure to decrease the cost of pharmaceuticals while also improving their efficacy. So if you could describe like what your research is and how it contributes to larger society.
So my research, it's really fundamental. So my whole goal right now, it's a contribution to common chemical knowledge in the form of synthesis. So we want to figure out easier ways to synthesize molecules that are complex and that are found in different drug molecules in order to decrease the price, like you said before. So currently, my real contributions just come with building a toolkit. I want to build a toolkit to give to those chemists in the pharmaceutical companies or those medicinal chemists that are actually making drugs that can help them build molecules more efficiently, kind of like building a car faster. That's what I'm trying to do with molecules.
And do you know, like, based on what you've synthesized thus far, how long it could possibly take for your contribution to work and be implemented by these industry companies?
Yeah, so that's something that a lot of people don't know is that typically the lab to population pipeline for a drug is typically like 10 to 15 years. So I'm at the very, very beginning of that pipeline. And so if you take into account trying to figure out the potency of a drug, trying to figure out it through animal testing, through in vivo testing, et cetera, it's a pretty long time. So that was something I had to deal with in my PhD was the lack of direct applicability of my research.
Got it. So are you familiar with the issues related to the pharmaceutical costs? Like, are there actual companies that are working towards lowering the cost of the drugs, or are we mainly just depending on academia?
So there are pharmaceutical companies that want to lower the cost of the drugs. However, typically it's more so for a selfish gain. It's like they want to lower the cost to make it so that they can have a higher window of profit. So hopefully the work that I do more so stays in the academia realm where drugs are being developed using taxpayers' dollars, and they're more so staying, like the patent staying at universities, so there's not that price gouge. Because once you sell the patent over to your typical pharmaceutical company, that's where you see the huge price gouge of a lot of drugs.
That sounds about right. So,
yeah,
that sounds right. Okay, so when you originally got to your university, you have to pick out your research advisor. And from what I've learned, your research advisor was new to the university, just like you. So what made you say, hey, I'm going to work for this new guy?
So that's a really funny story. So I'm originally from Oklahoma. And I was coming from Dartmouth, which is in New Hampshire. So typically, as a grad student, whenever you're leaving undergrad, you go home for the summer and you kick it for a little bit, or if you're lucky, you can go to your university and do a little bit of research before you start your first year. Well, since I was from Oklahoma, my parents only lived like 45 minutes from OU. So that summer, I was able to commute to the university and kind of do like free research. So I went to a professor who was established at OU. And he curved me. Like he was like, your package looks good, but I'm just not really interested in taking any synthetic chemist right now. But we have like 3 new professors coming into the department. You should like see what they're doing. I was like, wow, like I literally just got curved by a professor. That's cool. So then I contacted the 2 professors, and then long story short, me and Dr. Sharma, we just vibed. Like he was as driven as I was, and he made it very clear that our successes are intercorrelated. So however successful he is, that's how successful I will be. And like we can feed off of each other. And so whenever he made that plain and clear and wasn't trying to like sell me false dreams, because like it's very, you can tell whenever someone's like selling you things just to join a lab. He was just being super real with me. He said it was going to be hard work. And then he ended it with saying that a PhD is like a marriage. You're like committing your time, your effort to this other person in a partnership. And, you have to figure out if those personalities match. And I want to be honest and say, like, I wasn't really worried about his research projects. I knew that he did synthesis, but I couldn't realistically say, oh, this professor's research is what I want to do, because he didn't have an established program. Like he was just finishing his postdoc. So that decision was made just on, and I hate to sound simple and basic, it was based on just vibes. We just vibed really well.
So in your opinion, having that great relationship and that feeling like I can trust and this person believes in me is more important than the actual research, or in your case, it just so happened to work out that way?
So I believe that it across the board, I will go so far to say that is more important than the research, because if you be real with yourself whenever you're pursuing a STEM PhD, oftentimes the project that you're sold your first year, whenever you're doing rotations or you're choosing a lab, that's not going to be the project that your thesis is going to be on, because science has such a high failure rate. And so if you're in a advisor, mentor, mentee relationship, and you don't have that good relationship, whenever your PhD advisor comes to pitch you a new idea, that isn't what he sold you at first. It's like, okay, can I actually trust him with this idea? Or is he just trying to, pitch me some other experiment that will end up failing? It's like you start to become skeptical if you don't have that good relationship and that trust established from the beginning. So I have a couple friends that are starting their PhDs right now or in the beginning parts of it. And I tell them, like, yeah, look at the research, but what's most important is if you're actually vibing with that professor and if you can actually have a good relationship with that professor.
And you first got to the university and you're looking around, right? And out of habit, I know I do this. I'm looking for someone that looks like me. So I'm like, it's just a habit. And I wish that I can step away and be more comfortable with, okay, I know that I'm the only one, stop looking, but it happens. So you're in this space and you realize like, wait, were you the only one in the room? Were you the only Black woman in the room when you first got to University of Oklahoma?
So I was definitely the only woman in my batch, the only Black woman in my batch. Then there was one other Black woman, but she was doing analytical chemistry, and then she actually dropped out of the program before she finished. So for a while, until a year ago, whenever I was able to happily recruit another Black girl to join OU to come to our department, I was the only Black girl around, definitely in the department.
Mm-hmm. So at what point did you realize that you were the first African-American woman to graduate or to be pursuing on the track to graduate with a PhD in organic chemistry from that university?
So this actually surprises a lot of people. I didn't know until after I defended. It was nothing I was at all aware of. We have a professor in our department who has been there for, I think, 30 some odd years. And he keeps track of a lot of, he's from Ghana. And he keeps track a lot of those minority statistics, like those firsts and stuff of that nature. So he hadn't ever informed me. I think it was a good idea because I feel like I didn't need that pressure as I was pursuing because I had pressure from so many other things coming at me. But he told me after I defended, he was like, I don't know if you're aware, but did you know that you're the first Black woman that's graduated from the organic division at OU? And I was like, wow, I had no idea, but I wasn't too surprised. It's mainly because we're in Oklahoma. It's a red state. It doesn't sound that appeasing to come to Oklahoma. And secondly, organic is hard. Organic is a
Absolutely.
So this is in organic, my typical lab day is 12 hours. Like I'm at the bench starting new experiments. We're those chemists that have like chemicals and fumes and all that stuff at us consistently. And it's not a very attractive field to pursue.
So I also wonder, now that you found this out, did it kind of give you an extra boost? What was your initial feeling or emotion when he told you this?
I think it was more so I felt the need to ensure that the girl that I had convinced to join the organic division, to join my lab, so she's from the Bahamas, I felt the need to ensure that I did everything in my possible will to ensure that she was successful. I just really want to make sure, even once I leave OU and I start my independent career, it's like I feel a very close tie to make sure that the second Black woman to graduate with her PhD in organic chemistry at OU comes in 3 years, because that's whenever she's supposed to graduate. So I just want to make sure that she doesn't feel unsupported in any way once I leave, because she's told me that she views me as a support system. And I think that's really good, because she said that there's been times where she wants to actually leave the program already. And so the fact that I've been there physically as her support system is important. But now I see that's even more important to know that this is a stat that exists.
So was there a time where you felt like you wanted to leave? Or was there ever a time in your 5 years that you felt like, oh, I'm done?
Yeah. So one of my committee members, he won't ever let me forget this story. So it was at the beginning of my second year, and I'm sure you're aware, I'm not sure exactly what year you're in, but the beginning of your second year is super hard. That's one of the most difficult times that I recall in my PhD. And I remember going to, so I didn't go to my advisor because I didn't want to show my advisor, that my actual PhD advisor, that I was weak. I didn't want to be labeled as that overly emotional, weak Black girl that can't handle stress. But I had another committee member who I felt that more so close connection. And I know that he wouldn't go snitch and tell my advisor that I came to him crying. But I entered into his office and I broke down crying. I was like, because OU isn't a top tier institution. And coming from a pretty prestigious undergrad, I knew the power of a university name. And I started freaking out. I was like, I'm going to get this PhD. And because it's from OU, the ceiling on my job possibilities is going to stay. Like, I'm going to have a ceiling there. I'm not going to be able to get certain things because I'm getting a PhD from OU. And I went into his office, crying and freaking out. I'm like, I'm just going to waste all these 5 years. And he was like, Arianne, he was like, you're the determiner of your own success. He was like, you're the person that determines this. I was like, but I'm already challenged because I'm a Black woman. Da, 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 da. He was like, that doesn't matter. You're the determinant in your own success. And he just kept on repeating it to me. And then right there, a click, it just clicked to me. And then that's honestly, if I had to pinpoint a time whenever the grind started and all these everything became in motion, it was that moment whenever I was at one of my lowest points. So basically, to answer your question, at that moment I was trying to transfer to different universities for my PhD.
Wow. And that's so funny that you mentioned the name. You went to an Ivy League for undergrad, right? So you speak on the heaviness of a name and kind of being able to name drop. I went to this university and pick me. And I never thought about that before because I went to two, state schools. So I went to University of Illinois and then Purdue University. So can you speak a little bit more to that? How is your experience coming from an Ivy League university kind of shaped your experiences with how people interact with you as a scientist, or especially in as a graduate student?
Yeah. So whenever you're in the Ivy system, and that's where you're getting your education at, there's a lot of privileges that come. And the privileges oftentimes aren't directly correlated to what you've done. It's usually I have friends who had mediocre GPAs and they're working on Wall Street right now. And it's because they're able to pitch that name. And so then whenever you get into scientific circles and you start hearing that, it's oh, they always call it the chemistry tree, the academic chemistry tree. It's you say, my PI got his PhD from Harvard, then his advisor got their PhD from Caltech, et cetera, and you don't ever hear OU in those prestigious chemistry trees. And so whenever you go to these big conferences and, there's not that much respect that comes just off the bat whenever you name drop the university that you're from. And so I had went to my first conference before that breakdown in that professor's office, and I experienced it, and I was like, holy crap, OU is a big name in Oklahoma, but OU is not a big name in the chemistry world. And then that all started kind of just falling down on me, and I was able to see that for your typical person who does the bare minimum in terms of graduate work, they will ride the coattail of a university name. However, that shouldn't be the determiner of what you're able to do in terms of your career.
Mm-hmm. And you spoke on a little bit when you had your interview with STEM Media about how when you first got to undergrad, you were playing basketball. And when you spoke to an advisor, they kind of told you yeah, I know you thought that this was what you're going to major in, but actually this is what, that's too much for you.
Yeah.
So can you talk a little bit about how your experiences with college advisors kind of telling you what you can and can't do, and do you feel like it heavily impacted your experiences academically?
Definitely. So it definitely impacted my academic experience to the point where I stopped consulting my advisors in undergrad. They didn't have the respect for me. They didn't believe in my capabilities, because what a lot of people don't understand is whenever you go to these college advisors, especially as an incoming freshman, they have your whole package in front of you oftentimes. Like they have like your financial aid, they have like, like your grades, they have like what school you went to in high school and stuff of that nature. And so specifically whenever I was at Dartmouth, I didn't go to that prestigious boarding school on the East Coast. I had good test scores and et cetera, but I didn't have those like optimal test scores because I was an athlete. And then they see that you're an athlete and they say, oh, you only got into this university because you played basketball and you don't really deserve to be here. And so they had all these preconceived notions in their minds and they weren't able to advise me as a human. And so I just quit consulting them. I was like, I know what I can do. I know my work ethic. And just because someone went to a boarding school and got an education that they had to pay for in high school doesn't mean that they're any better than me. It's just that they were exposed to more stuff than me. And so whenever I realized that, I knew I was at a disadvantage because I kind of had to advise myself through college. But I feel like if I wouldn't have done that, my potential would have been limited and I wouldn't be where I am today.
So you also had to kind of re-identify yourself while you were in undergrad because you had an injury that made it such that you had to make a decision like, do I want to risk my ability to walk with ease or do I want to just stop playing basketball? And I know as an athlete, there is this I was a cheerleader for years, like a competitive cheerleader for years. So I completely understand this idea of identifying yourself with the sport in which you participate in. And you kind of had that taken away from you. So do you feel like when you had that injury, that transitioning from one identity kind of to another made it so that you almost had to like push yourself into this new, I guess, space? Do you kind of understand what I'm asking?
Yeah. That time in my life was one of the most difficult times I've ever experienced. And that's like with going through the whole PhD process. That re-identification, it caused me to lose a lot of friends because if you think, I'm sure this is how it is with cheerleading, those are your homies. Like that's who you rock with like every day. And so whenever I wasn't playing basketball and I wasn't at the practices, it's like friendships started to drift apart. And I lost a lot in terms of who I identified myself as. And then not only that, I was thousands of miles away from my family in the mountains of New Hampshire, like literal mountains. And so I was devastated. I remember calling my mom, crying and begging to her, like, I got to leave. I got to get out of here. And she kind of just was able to be my therapist from afar and tell me like, no, you're in the position that you're supposed to be. Like God put you there. Like, don't worry. And so that re-identification caused me to actually look into myself internally and figure out what I wanted to do. And so I was able to find that inner child and say, what did Ari like whenever she was 5, 6 years old? And immediately, I always wanted to be a scientist. I always wanted to be a chemist. And I was being driven off that path by sports, but now I didn't have sports as an excuse anymore. Like I didn't have the excuse of, oh, well, I have 6 a.m. practice, so there's no way that I could take chemistry this semester. Like I didn't have that excuse anymore. So that transition and that re-identification caused me to actually find what made me happy. And it hurt in the process, but that's why happiness and joy is like so important to me whenever I am working, whenever I am doing what I do now.
So beyond like your mom and into more of your extended family and, you know, the rest of the wonderful people that I'm sure supported you, how was it like getting support from your family, seeing that you were far away from home as you were getting through both undergrad and your PhD?
So whenever I was an undergrad, I hate to say it, but the support was a little bit shallow. I didn't have that intense support. So my stepfather, who I'm super close with, he was overseas doing contracting work. So that left my mom at home as like basically a single mom. So she had to take care of both of my sisters. And then my oldest sister, she does public health. She just got married, was pregnant and stuff like that. So like that immediate family, they were busy. And so it out of sight, out of mind kind of played into it. So whenever I was in undergrad, I really had to kind of depend on myself a lot. And that caused me to develop more spiritual relationships and realize that there's something greater out there for me in terms of support. But then whenever I got home, I was able to kind of hash all that out with my family and say, hey, like, I need y'all. Like, I came back to Oklahoma because I need the support of my family. And so ever since then, they've been the key to me being able to do what I do at such a high level, because on Sundays, so I always work 6 days a week. Or at least I did in grad school. And then on Sunday, I drove 45 minutes up the highway and I kicked it with my family all day. So they were able to recharge me. So kind of realizing that I needed my family whenever I was an undergrad caused me to seek them out intentionally whenever I was in grad school.
I appreciated that so much. Like, I'm over here emotional. Like, that is amazing. So you would go home every Sunday and chill with your family?
Yes. Yeah. No if and sometimes my PhD advisor would be like, oh, I'm like, can you meet with me on Sunday? I'm like, nah, I can't. I'm sorry.
I love that so much. Like, we'll talk offline about it. I really like to give like you this space to talk about your story. But if you could redo college with all the knowledge that you have, like, if you could change one thing, what would be the one thing? And you have to pick something. Don't say, oh, well, if I didn't go through what I went through. No, you have to change one thing.
Oh, no, I got one. So,
okay.
There's a story with it. I'm just going to give the story really quick. So I go around and I give talks and speeches and stuff. And I got invited to give a speech at University of Arkansas Pine Bluff, which is an HBCU in Arkansas. And I was able to see firsthand the support, just like the intense support that the administration, staff, faculty have for their Black scientists. They even have a program set up where if you maintain a 3.2 GPA and you're studying a science field, you get a for sure internship every summer and you get a, I think, $1,000 stipend every month. And so when I saw that, I was like, wow, whenever you look at these PWIs, these elite institutions, it's almost like they're doing everything in their power to make sure that the Black scientists fail. There's like nothing there to support, especially at least in my experience at Dartmouth. And so if I could change one thing, I'm being so honest, I would go to an HBCU. There's like no if, and, or but about it.
I'm snapping. Like, yes, I love, like, that's pretty cool though. I didn't know they had those type of programs, so I'm jealous. It is, but you're so honest. Like, that's real. There are no systems in place to help the Black scientists. If you want that, you have to do all the work yourself and force yourself into these spaces versus people reaching out to you and telling you like, no, we're going to make sure you are a success story.
Right.
Okay, so you recently graduated. You defended back in April, right?
Yes.
So what was your experience with preparing for your defense?
So preparing for my defense in terms of the material, like the academic material, was fairly easy. I was blessed enough to have a pretty successful graduate career in terms of research and publications. So the actual academic side was easy, but what a lot of people don't understand is that's only one component of it. You have to have the willpower to write your dissertation, to sit down and be like, no, you can't go try to distract yourself, quote unquote, with lab work. There's no experiments that you need to actually run right now because you're trying to actually write a book about the experiments that you've been running for the past like 4 years. So that's not an excuse. Then it's like you have to, acquiesce your friends and family and be like, yeah, no, I'm not in lab right now, but just because I'm sitting at home and I'm writing or I'm sitting in the library writing doesn't mean that I can entertain you guys whenever you want.
Can we pause right here? Can we pause right here? Can you describe how you eloquently told your family this? Like, how were those conversations? Like, I can't talk to you. Okay, I can't talk. How was that?
So I'm known to have a pretty smart mouth. And so what I would oftentimes do is I would be like, okay, I was like, everyone, it would be on Sunday. I'm like, everyone sit down. I need you guys to understand that right now it may seem like I'm doing nothing, But in all actuality, I'm doing something that's really, really big. I'm writing a book. And then I show them a book. I'm like, you see this chapter book right here? Multiply that times 3. And that's what I'm actually writing right now. And I can't be bothered for the week. And so then if they send something in the group chat and then they get upset that I'm not responding, I'm like, hey, y'all, like, I just can't respond. But it got to the point where I literally just had to ghost. So I had to deactivate my social media for a month whenever I was like finishing up. I had to put my phone to where I didn't get any notifications and stuff like that. So it was really challenging because I felt like I was on an island and I was lonely, but it was necessary because I don't feel like I would have finished and did a job that I was happy with if I hadn't done that.
Okay. Thank you. So your academic is all there and you're sitting down, you're writing. So what about the actual preparing for the physical book? So you know that you have to write it, but you also have to do the PowerPoint presentation for the defense. So all of the material outside of the actual written thesis.
So I'm a perfectionist, and my PhD advisor would always say, he's like, you're going to pass no matter what. Given like what all you've done, like there's no way that you won't pass. Right now, what you're doing is you're trying to leave a legacy. You're trying to make sure you have a good pass or a great pass. And, you know, someone that whenever you leave here, you'd be like, people would say, oh yeah, Arianne Hunter, she was one of the best people that graduated from the organic division at OU, period. Like regardless of race, regardless of gender. So whenever I was doing all of that stuff in terms of writing, it's like whenever I was writing my dissertation, it's like, yeah, you can put those scientific facts, that evidence, that experimental data in there in science words very robotically. But my challenge to myself is that I wanted it to flow. I wanted it to be something as if I was a scientific communicator and I was communicating this to not only a technical audience, that was my committee, but a general audience where if they started reading, they could actually learn from this. So in terms of that, I actually had to read books on scientific communication. I have this book called Don't Be Such a Scientist by Randy Olson, who talks to scientists on how to actually communicate to a general public. So it's like I was more so prepping myself. So whenever the writing came, I was actually able to convey my science like I wanted to. In terms of PowerPoint, that was something I was also a perfectionist on. I wanted to make sure I had the correct animation, the correct color combinations. Like I really wanted it to be a no doubt about it pass. And it showed that was coming through whenever I was preparing for it. So I wouldn't really let many people distract me.
So do you have any regrets when it comes to your defense, or do you feel like it was like spot on perfect? Like if you could go back, how would you improve upon what you've done thus far?
My defense, I will be honest and say I believe it was spot on perfect. My parents actually came and they say that I didn't look at any notes. I didn't stop for water. I was
You were hydrated. You came in hydrated and ready, okay? Yeah, you was not playing with them.
Yeah, I had practiced like multiple times. And if you think about you're practicing an hour-long presentation, that's an intense practice whenever you're doing it at home and in front of friends. So I don't think there's anything that I would change in terms of that process.
So what advice do you have for those who are preparing for a defense?
My advice, I think the key point of advice is do the hard work early. So a lot of the data prep I had been doing consistently throughout grad school, so that whenever it came to accumulating all the data for the actual writing the dissertation, I didn't have to do anything. Like I already had files on my computer and on hard drives where the data was already compartmentalized, basically according to the chapters. See a vision for your PhD by your third year. Like if you don't see that vision coming to fruition, that's going to make it harder to start writing because you don't know where you're driving your research to by your third year. And then the last thing that for the actual process of writing schedules make all the difference. It holds yourself accountable. So I'm like the type of person where I do self goals. I do like little challenges for myself. And I made a writing schedule that kind of pushed me to actually complete stuff in a timely manner. And so I could, write it, reread it, edit it, etc. before I even took it out and gave it to my committee for proofs.
Did you write this like by hand, or was it a digital schedule? Like, could you share it with someone?
Yeah, it was more so I'm one of those obsessive people that have those calendars, those planners. And so I would always have it in my planner.
Okay, I asked because like I was wondering, how did you come about like planning out your writing? Did someone else help you with figuring out what's the best planning, or you just in your mind knew what you needed to do?
I knew what I needed to do, but it came based off of the effort put into writing a publication. So my PhD advisor, he really didn't help me in the writing of my dissertation. He was like, this is your final challenge and you're proof to me that you're a doctor now. And so he didn't really help me in that process. But what he did do is thoroughly train me whenever we would write publications together. So I was able to develop a writing schedule based off the work that you put into writing a publication to writing my dissertation.
So, you went through this whole process of getting a PhD, but it ain't easy. It's nothing easy about getting a PhD. So what kept you going?
What kept me going? So whenever you exist as a Black woman in the world, I won't even specify it to the United States, you don't have as many privileges. So being in my department, I would see white males drop out with the master's, and they would say, oh, I can easily just find a job in an industry and, make a good salary for my family, et cetera, et cetera. I can honestly say as a Black woman, I never have that sense of comfortability. And I knew that to have the quality of life that I envisioned for myself and to have the impact on society that I want to have, I knew that I had no choice but to keep on going. And so honestly, that's what inspired me. I had worked those manual labor jobs that you work whenever you're in high school. I worked at Target. I worked at Qdoba. I worked at a little cookie place in a bakery, and I was miserable. And I knew that I never wanted someone else to be over me. Like we can agree, like me and a boss or a person can like agree on stuff that I need to do, but I'm not going to have someone just barking at me to do pointless things that you do whenever you don't have as advanced degrees. So I just felt like I had no choice. Like I had no choice to just stop. And that's what I kept on pounding in my head whenever stuff got hard.
And what would be any like final words of advice that you have that you would like to share with anyone listening who is doing anything in life? Like, what advice do you have?
So, oh man, there's so much.
Just go for it.
One of the biggest things I live by is, and I feel like everyone knows this quote, is hard work beats talent whenever talent doesn't work hard. There were times where I honestly feel like there was someone that was smarter than me, but they didn't apply themselves in the right way. And that proves that, yeah, you can be equipped with all this knowledge, but if you're not applying it right, if you're not working hard and doing what you need to do and handling business, that doesn't mean anything. The second thing that I really want to emphasize is, and my mom specifically, she actually makes fun of me for it. She was like, Arianne, there's never a time where you're not confident in what you're doing. And that's something that I've actually had to work really hard at. I used to be the person that would be self-conscious and trying to figure out what other people were thinking of me. But us as Black scientists, us as female scientists, imposter syndrome is a thing. And I feel like we belong just as much as they belong. our brains are primed just as much as their brains are primed to do the work that we do. The only thing that's really differentiating us is that we believe that we can't do it, and they, no matter what, no matter if they fail something, they always think that they're the best in the room. And people aren't aware of how much just being confident changes your ability to be successful. And I didn't start realizing that until I did get up in academia and saw that, a white male will get to a chalkboard or a dry erase board. He doesn't know what he's talking about, but he's so confident that he's able to fool everyone
in the room. It convinced me when I'm looking at it, knowing dang well, I'm like, I studied this wrong.
Exactly. And that's something that I really try to emphasize with the girls that I work with in my nonprofit is that be confident in all that you do, especially if you've done the work in the preparation.
Speak a little bit about your nonprofit, please, because I just learned about it maybe a few hours ago. So can you tell me a little bit about your nonprofit, and then we're going to get on out of here?
Yeah. So basically, whenever I decided to come back to Oklahoma for grad school, one of the key components of that decision was that I wanted to come back and do work in STEM outreach. I grew up in Oklahoma, and I saw the limited access that girls specifically have to the sciences, especially in the public school system. And so I knew that there were other girls out there like me who were interested in sciences but didn't have that exposure. So whenever I first got here, that was something that I directly went to my advisor about, and I was like, I want to start a nonprofit. And he was on board with it because, lo and behold, any work that I do in terms of outreach, he can put into his National Science Foundation grant application. And so I kind of started getting the ball rolling. I reached out to a lot of middle schools in the inner Oklahoma City area, stuff of that nature. And I founded a nonprofit called We Do Science Too. And I was able to bring girls into my laboratory, do work with them. I did tutoring. We did a lot of field trips, outreach work. And then the cool thing about it is because I was in my PI's laboratory, he was able to write about what we were doing and say that he was going to partner with my nonprofit. And so he ended up getting that grant. And so he was able to partially fund a lot of the work that I did. And then that work led to me being a contractor for another nonprofit in Oklahoma City called Girl Tech. And I do a lot of work with them also. So they're not minority specific, they're just female specific. And so I do a lot of work with them.
That is so goals. I would love to have something similar to that in the Chicago area. It's beautiful that you were able to go home and pour back into your community and the girls that you feel that really needed it the most, and that you were able to extend beyond the nonprofit that you did and help someone else out with what they had going on. That's amazing. You're amazing. Oh my goodness. What an honor to have you here. Thank you so much for sharing your time with us.
No problem. I'm very blessed to have the opportunity to speak with you. I think this is an amazing platform.
She is a bomb, right? Yes. If you want to connect with her, she is on Instagram at dr.arihunter. The link is in the show notes, as always, alongside the link to her LinkedIn profile. And let me tell you something. Dr. Hunter came prepared, okay? She said this is a health-related podcast. We gonna talk health. So she also taught me about candida overgrowth, which is a topic that she feels greatly impacts women even if we don't know it. So if you want to learn more about candida overgrowth, go over to the Research Her app, download it, and listen to the bonus episode. It's a real quick listen, but she puts us on game about this disorder. The app is available on iOS and Android. To connect with me, I am at The Research Her on social media, links in bio, or show notes. I will be back next week, and I ain't gonna lie, I don't know whether it's a solo or interview, but let the suspense kill you. I holla.